Dear viewers, welcome to our channel. Subscribe to receive more stories every day. The night air was thick with the scent of brewing tea, a warm aroma of chamomile and honey filling the kitchen. The glow of the pendant lights cast long shadows across the marble countertops, reflecting the tension hanging between Mira and her husband, Josh. She watched as he stirred the 2 cups. His movements unusually slow, calculated. The clink of the spoon against porcelain echoed in the silent kitchen. Mira shifted in her chair, her fingers curling around the edge of the counter. Something felt off. Josh was quiet, too quiet. Normally, he'd hum while making their nightly tea, an unconscious habit that filled the quiet evenings they spent together. But tonight, he was absorbed in his task, stirring and stirring long after the sugar should have dissolved. "You okay?" she asked, forcing a light tone. Josh startled, blinking rapidly before forcing a smile. Just lost in thought. Myra's stomach twisted. It wasn't the first time she had caught him zoning out lately. There was a distance between them, one she couldn't quite explain. She turned her head as the sound of heels clicked against the hardwood floor, signaling the arrival of her Vanessa. Josh's older sister was a force of nature, elegant, poised, and always watching. She made no secret of the fact that she didn't approve of Mira, though she never outright said it. Instead, she let her disapproval seep into the way she spoke, the way she lingered in their home uninvited, the way her sharp eyes assessed everything Mira did. "You two are awfully quiet," Vanessa remarked as she stepped into the kitchen, her presence immediately taking up all the space in the room. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Something wrong?" Josh forced a chuckle, handing Mira a mug. "No, just tired. Long day." Mira accepted the cup, the warmth seeping into her fingers. She lifted it toward her lips, but then hesitated. "Smell. Faint. Strange. Not the familiar scent of chamomile, but something sharper. Bitter." Her stomach clenched. Vanessa's gaze flickered toward the mug, and for the first time that night, there was something in her expression Mira couldn't place. A sliver of hesitation, a flicker of concern. Before Mira could stop herself, she made a split-second decision. She switched cups with Vanessa. It was quick, almost effortless. A little laugh, a feigned accident, a casual exchange. Vanessa arched an eyebrow but said nothing, simply accepting the new cup. Josh stiffened. Mira noticed. Vanessa took a sip. For a moment everything was normal. Then her brows furrowed slightly. She set the cup down. "What kind of tea is this?" Josh's grip tightened on his own mug. "Chamomile," he answered too quickly. Vanessa's frown deepened. "No, it's not." The air grew unbearably heavy. Myra's heartbeat pounded in her ears as she looked between them. And then Vanessa swayed. A sharp inhale, a waver in her stance. Her fingers curled against the counter as if she was struggling to steady herself. Mira leaped to her feet. "Vanessa!" Her sister-in-law's lips parted, as if she wanted to say something, but no words came out. Instead, her eyes rolled back, and she crumpled to the floor. The mug shattered against the tile, tea splashing across the kitchen in an explosion of ceramic shards. Josh's face went pale. He didn't move, didn't react. Myra's pulse thundered in her ears as she dropped to her knees beside Vanessa, her hands trembling as she hovered over her still form. She wasn't breathing right. Hello, gasped, her body twitching slightly before going eerily still. A scream built in Myra's throat. She turned to Josh, her voice shaking. "Call an ambulance." Josh remained frozen, his eyes locked onto Vanessa, his face a mask of pure shock. Mira grabbed his arm, shaking him. "Josh! Now!" He blinked, as if waking from a trance, and fumbled for his phone. Mira pressed 2 fingers to Vanessa's wrist, searching for a pulse. It was there but weak, fading. This wasn't a normal reaction. This wasn't some freak accident. Something was in that tea. Myra's stomach twisted as she looked back at the counter, at the untouched mug, the one that had originally been meant for her. Her blood turned to ice. Had she just switched cups with death itself? The sirens screamed in the night, growing louder as they neared the house. Myra's knees dug into the cold tile as she kept her trembling fingers on Vanessa's pulse. It was still there but weak. Her chest barely moved with each shallow breath. Josh was on the phone, his voice a distant murmur, but Myra could hardly focus. Her mind was spinning, her pulse hammering against her ribs. What was in that tea? The realization hit her like a freight train. It was meant for me. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay calm. She needed to think. She needed to remember every single detail of what had just happened. Josh had made the tea. Josh had stirred the cups. Josh had frozen when she switched mugs with Vanessa. Her stomach twisted. The man she loved, the man she had built a life with. Had he just tried to? A new kind of fear settled deep in her bones. Before she could process it, the paramedics burst through the door, their movements swift and efficient. Myra backed away, giving them space as they assessed Vanessa. "What happened?" one of them asked, kneeling beside her. She drank tea, then she collapsed," Myra stammered, wrapping her arms around herself. "Was she allergic to anything?" "I don't know." Myra glanced at Josh. "Was she?" He barely reacted, his face pale and unreadable. "No." The paramedics exchanged a look before hoisting Vanessa onto a stretcher. "We need to get her to the hospital immediately." Josh hesitated. I'll go with her." Myra's breath caught. She needed to go too. She needed to be there when Vanessa woke up. Vanessa woke up, but something held her back. She looked at the counter, the untouched tea. A cold realization struck her. If Josh had tampered with the drink, the evidence was right there. She had a choice: rush to the hospital or find out the truth. Her hands curled into fists. She knew what she had to do. The house was eerily quiet after the ambulance left, its sirens fading into the distance. Myra moved quickly, grabbing a small glass vial from the pantry, the one she used for storing herbs. With careful hands, she poured some of the untouched tea into it, sealing it tight. Her hands shook as she placed the vial into her purse. If she was wrong, if this was all some misunderstanding, she'd regret this suspicion for the rest of her life. But if she was right? She swallowed hard, her throat dry. She needed answers. And she knew exactly where to get them. The hospital was a blur of bright white lights and sterile air. Myra walked in quickly, her heart pounding. She found Josh pacing outside Vanessa's room, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "She's stable," he said, voice hoarse. "They're running tests." Myra barely heard him. She was too busy studying his face. Every twitch of his features, every flicker of emotion in his eyes. Was it guilt? Or just exhaustion? She decided to push. "I don't understand," she said carefully. "He took my cup. If there was something wrong with the tea, it should have been me on that stretcher." Josh flinched, just slightly, but Myra caught it. Her heart pounded. "I mean, it's crazy, right?" she continued, watching him closely. "Who would even do something like that?" Josh's jaw tightened. "Myra, stop." "Stop what?" "Just stop." His voice cracked and suddenly he looked tired, as if the weight of something unbearable had settled on his shoulders. Myra's breath hitched. "Josh," she whispered. "What did you do?" Silence. "And then?" "I wasn't trying to hurt you," he muttered, his voice barely audible. Her blood ran cold. She took a shaky step back. "Then what were you trying to do?" Josh exhaled, his hands trembling as he gripped the edge of the chair beside him. I put something in the tea." Myra's stomach lurched. "What?" "I didn't want you to." He cut himself off, shaking his head. "I thought it was the only way." "The only way to what?" she demanded, her voice rising. Josh finally met her gaze, and in his eyes, she saw something she didn't recognize. Desperation, regret, and something darker. "I was trying to stop you from getting pregnant." The world tilted. Myra took another step back, gripping the hospital wall for support. "What?" she breathed. Josh swallowed hard. I knew you wanted a baby. You talked about it all the time." "But he shook his head. I'm not ready, Mira. I never was. And I knew. I knew if I told you, you wouldn't listen. So you drugged me. The words tasted like poison on her tongue. Josh's face twisted. I didn't think of it like that. That's exactly what you did. Her voice cracked. You tried to take away my choice. Josh opened his mouth, but no words came out. And then it hit her. Vanessa had known. That's why she had hesitated before drinking the tea. That's why she had switched cups so easily. She had suspected something. Maybe not the full truth, but enough. And she had tried to save Mira. Instead, she had nearly died for it. Mira felt like she was going to be sick. She backed away again, her body trembling. You lied to me, she whispered. Josh took a step forward. Mira, please. She turned and walked away. She didn't stop until she was outside, gasping for air. Her heart felt like it was about to shatter. But she wasn't done. Not yet. She reached into her purse, pulled out the vial of tea, and clenched it in her fist. She was going to have it tested. And when she had the results, Josh wouldn't just lose her. He would lose everything. Mira sat in her car outside the hospital, gripping the vial of tea so tightly, it was a wonder it didn't shatter in her hands. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. Rage, betrayal, disbelief. Josh had drugged her. Not to kill her. Not to make her sick. But to control her. She clenched her jaw, staring at the lights of the hospital entrance. Vanessa had saved her. Mira had never thought she and Vanessa would ever be on the same side of anything. But tonight Vanessa had taken a risk. Whether she had truly known what was in the tea, or if she had just suspected something was off, it didn't matter. She had put herself in danger to protect Mira. And Josh. Mira forced herself to take deep breaths. One step at a time. She needed proof. The lab tech at the private clinic eyed her curiously when she handed over the sample. This is tea, he asked, lifting an eyebrow. Mira nodded. Yes. I just need to know if it contains anything unusual. The man gave her a slow nod, clearly debating whether he should ask more questions. He must have read the desperation in her eyes because he simply said, results will be ready in 24 hours. Mira exhaled. She could wait that long. She had to. The following evening, Mira sat in her car outside the lab, hands clenched into fists as she stared at the envelope in her lap. Her stomach was in knots. She knew what it would say. She just wasn't ready to see it. Finally, she tore open the envelope, her eyes scanning the words quickly. There it was. Traces of synthetic hormones. High doses. Emergency contraception. Mira let out a shaking breath. Josh had been slipping these into her tea. Her hands trembled as she folded the results, pressing them against her chest. It was real. He had taken away her choice, and she would never forgive him for it. Mira stormed into the house that night, slamming the door behind her. Josh looked up from the couch, surprised. Mira, where have you been? She threw the test results onto the coffee table. I had the tea tested. Josh froze. His face went pale. You drugged me, she whispered, her voice dangerously calm. Josh swallowed hard. Mira, I was trying to control me. She cut him off, stepping closer. Decide for me. Lie to me. His jaw clenched. You don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly. Her voice wavered, but her fury burned hotter than ever. You thought I'd never find out. You thought I'd just go on drinking your little concoctions while you played God with my life. Josh ran a hand over his face, exhaling sharply. Mira, listen. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I panicked. I wasn't ready. You thought you'd take away my choice rather than have an honest conversation. Her voice cracked, but she refused to let the tears fall. You didn't respect me enough to tell me the truth. Josh looked desperate now, stepping toward her. I love you, Mira. I thought I was protecting us. Mira let out a bitter laugh. Protecting us. Vanessa nearly died. Josh flinched. That's right, she continued, eyes burning with rage. She knew something was wrong. And she took the cup that was meant for me. Josh's face contorted with emotion. I didn't mean for that to happen. Mira shook her head. But it did. And you're a coward. His eyes darkened. Mira, please. She took a deep breath, straightened her spine. I want a divorce. Josh paled. Oh. Mira, we can fix this. She laughed, shaking her head. You broke this, Josh. There's nothing left to fix. The weight of it hit him then. She saw it in his eyes. The realization that she was truly done. That he had gone too far. And she didn't feel an ounce of sympathy. Mira grabbed her coat. I'll send a lawyer. Don't contact me. Josh opened his mouth, but no words came out. She walked to the door, pausing just before stepping out. Then she turned to him one last time. You didn't just lose me, Josh. You lost everything. With that, she walked out of the house, out of the lies, out of the betrayal. And for the first time in a long time, she felt free. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. Share with us what you think of this story and tell us where you're watching from.